Hello, Methactin Academic Bio. Today we're going to start talking about cellular respiration. So last week we were talking about photosynthesis, and photosynthesis is the process of plants taking energy from the sun and turning it into sugar. That sugar is then used for both plants and animals to then power their cells. So we're going to look at this process today, but I told you last week that photosynthesis and cell respiration are opposites. So last week, when we looked at photosynthesis, we said that plants take in carbon dioxide and water, and they use that to make sugar and oxygen. So since this is the opposite process, when we look at the equation for cellular respiration, we're going to start by reversing the photosynthesis equation. So the cellular respiration and the photosynthesis equations are opposites. So that means the things that we started with in photosynthesis are the things that we're going to end with in cellular respiration. And the things that we were made in photosynthesis are the things we're going to start with in cellular respiration. So cellular respiration occurs in plants and animals. If it confuses you to think about plants, then just focus on animals. So when we're talking about the product or what we're starting with, what do animals need to survive? Animals need oxygen and they need food, okay? And that food more specifically is sugar, and that sugar even more specifically is glucose. So our glucose has a formula of C6H12O6. And our oxygen gas, we know that has a formula of O2. And I'll come back to the 6 here in just a little bit. So we start with, and it's not labeled here, but you could label this reactants. The reactants for cellular respiration, the things that we start with, are oxygen gas and sugar or glucose. And then in the cytoplasm and the mitochondria, the sugar is broken down and turned into carbon dioxide, which you know is the formula CO2. And water is released during this process as well. So water is sort of made as the byproduct. Okay, so creates 6 CO2 and 6 water molecules. Now the reason for the 6 is here, and in front of the oxygen and the carbon dioxide and the sugar is to balance the equation. So we have 6 carbons here in the sugar, which means that we're going to have to give off, since each carbon dioxide only has 1 carbon, we're going to have to give off 6 carbon dioxide molecules. And then if you balance out the hydrogens and the oxygen, we end up with 6 oxygen molecules, and 1 sugar makes 6 carbon dioxides and 6 waters. Now, cellular respiration is the process of breaking down food to produce energy for your cells. This is going to occur basically in all cells. Now, not all cells have a mitochondria, so we're just going to focus on the mitochondria part. So cell respiration occurs in the mitochondria of plants. Plants have mitochondria. Animal cells have mitochondria. And fungi and protist cells, because they are eukaryotic, should have mitochondria as well, the powerhouse. So cell respiration does occur, some sort of energy breakdown occurs in all cells. But plants, animals, fungi, and protists have mitochondria. So it's occurring in the mitochondria of those organisms. Another thing that we talked about in photosynthesis was we talked about these batteries. The batteries that are used in cell processes, and we said there's a specific type of battery used for cell energies. And glucose is broken down, and the energy from the sugar is used to charge the cell's batteries. So the first battery is the same. In cell respiration, we use ATP. When it's in its charged form, it's called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And when it's in its weakened or dead form, it is known as ADP. There's 2 additional batteries. We're not really going to focus on them too much this year, but if you would come across them, Mr. Walton, who teaches AP Bio, calls them the NADs and the FADs. So this one is NAD, and this one is FAD. Again, those are the dead forms, the shortened version. The short 3-letter form is the dead or weakened form of the battery. And when the battery is fully charged, the name is longer. So if you just remember that the batteries with more letters have more energy, that'll typically get you, help you to figure them out. So this one is when NAD is high energy or fully charged, it becomes NADH. And when FAD is high energy or fully charged, it becomes FADH2. It might also help you to remember that when the H is on the end, the H stands for high energy. So NADH is high energy and FADH2 is definitely high energy. Okay, so these are the charged batteries that we're going to be working with in this process. And these are the dead batteries that we're going to be working with in this process. So just keep those tucked away for later in the week when we talk about the specifics of what's happening in cellular respiration. The last part of cellular respiration that we have to talk about for today is the parts of a mitochondria. So since most of this process is going to occur in the mitochondria, actually not all occurs, but most of it occurs in the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. So we have to look at specifically the parts of the mitochondria. And if you remember when we were drawing our parts to the cell, we said the mitochondria always has that squiggly line through the middle. Well, that squiggly line is a very important part of what happens in cellular respiration. And that squiggly line is technically called the inner membrane. So if there's an inner membrane, which is this dark black squiggly line on the inside, then the outer membrane is going to be the black line around the outside. Inside here, this light yellow space is what we call the matrix. Okay, so the matrix is that light yellow part on the inside. And then the space between the inner and the outer membrane has a super technical name. It's called the intramembrane space. Intra means between. So it's the intramembrane space. So those are the four things you really need to know. The outer membrane, the inner membrane, the matrix is inside the inner membrane, and the intramembrane space is between the two membranes. Sometimes you may see the folds of the inner membrane, and the folds of the inner membrane are typically it's these parts here, but they're referred to as the cristae. And again, that is a Latin term. The AE ending is a Latin ending, so they're called the cristae. If you ever see that term, it's just referring to the inner membrane of the mitochondria. We're not going to use it too much, but you might see it potentially on a keystone or on a worksheet or, a gizmo, or if you go on to anatomy or AP bio, you may see it there as well. Okay. So please fill in your notes accordingly. Just page 1. We're not going to go on from page 1 today. And that's all for today. Please check back to Google Classroom for further assignments.